Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Billson. Our next guest helps us, he talks about Tennessee with us. He's, I've said this many, many times. I think he's one of the true journalists that you can read, covering UT, a real tell it like it is type of guy. He's Caleb Calhoun. Allfortennessee.com is his website. Tennessee, where's it all gone? Preparing for their last regular season game, their traditional season finale against Vanderbilt, this time in Music City. And it comes after a 50-17 loss to the Missouri Tigers that Caleb Calhoun saw coming, saying, look, Missouri will be tougher than Kentucky. The man is a prophet. He joins me now. And, hey, 50-17 to Missouri. Isn't the Tennessee football coach supposed to get fired after that? I thought that was the call of procedure. I guess Jeremy Pruitt is still in the honeymoon period and such. But your thoughts on the football game?
Yeah, honestly, I picked Missouri to win, and I actually picked Missouri to cover. I didn't pick them to blow Tennessee out the way they did, though. I got to be honest with you. And I would say that is if you're talking about positives and negatives first-year head coaches, and, you use barometers to look at the future, getting blown out consistently in losses is a concern. I wrote a story that I think the last, every national championship coach, or even college football playoff or SEC championship coach of the last 20 years, didn't lose more than one game by 20 in their first season. And Jeremy Pruitt has now lost, I think, 4, or is it 5?
It's 5, I believe. Bama, Georgia, or was Georgia within the? I'm trying to remember the margin of victory of Georgia.
Was by more than 20.
Okay, Georgia, yeah. West Virginia was 26, because Georgia and West Virginia were both 20, or was it Florida was, and Missouri now was 33. So there are 5 blowout losses here, in addition to the victories against Bama and Kentucky. Now, you mentioned national championship coaches there, Caleb, but I mean, you're showing, wow. I mean, are you living 20 years in the past here? I mean, I've got to ask, is it, after 20 years of not winning the SEC, I mean, is talking about winning a national title at Tennessee like talking about winning a national title, let's suggest, at Nebraska? Let's suggest at Minnesota, at Pitt, at one of those programs that just aren't quite what they were. Should we be looking at that, or should we be looking at, hey, let's try to get back to 9 victory status here, instead of really thinking about national championships here and blowout losses in the first year?
Well, I wasn't even referring to just national championship coaches. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's also SEC and coaches that have just been in contention. So
okay.
So entertaining the idea that Tennessee has fallen back to a level that is lesser than it used to be, I think it's still reasonable to expect to get a head coaches to where at least maybe once every 4 years you're in the running. Mm-hmm. When you're at your peak as a program. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And we see that all the time with schools, and so that's still a little bit of concern. But as far as what you're saying, I'm still not so sure. I think right now it is difficult only because of the coaches that are at other schools right now. It's kind of hard for Tennessee to recruit. South Carolina with Dabo Swinney at Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the SEC East is about to be loaded in the future. I mean, we're talking Florida's not going anywhere with Dan Mullen. Georgia's not going anywhere with Kirby Smart. Which, funny enough, it kind of, and now Kentucky with Mark Stoops. I will say this. I said a week ago that Kentucky was the most fraudulent winning team in the NCAA, and I've been proven right about that. But they still now have a big recruiting selling point, having been successful this year. So, no one's talking about this. The biggest thing facing Tennessee right now is there's a changing of the guard in the SEC, and if you take out Alabama, the East has suffered as the West this year. Actually, significantly, I think, too.
I see that. The question is, who is the bottom feeder? And it would seem a lot of people would say Vanderbilt, but my goodness, Vanderbilt, they play Notre Dame to 5 points in South Bend. Now you can look at a lot of other games that were not necessarily competitive. You can say, okay, well, Tennessee, they beat Kentucky and Vandy didn't, but you can also say, well, they beat Florida and Tennessee didn't. There's a lot of inconsistency between these two teams, but I want to go back to Missouri here. Of course, now we know a lot of Tennessee fans have been calling this Jared Guarantano. He got hurt. I, by the way, didn't necessarily think that was the problem of the line. I thought the line gave huge holes for the running backs to go through, and I even heard Jeremy Pruitt's comments that, you know what, it was the running backs that are supposed to stay in and block that didn't pick that up when Guarantano got hurt or when we were suffering a sack or a hurry. That being said, it seems like, okay, we've been talking about when will Guarantano get down. This seems to be the case. Do you start him absolutely if he is, say, 80%, or would you go with Keller Christ due to the fact that, yeah, he threw 2 bad picks, but he also showed an ability to throw the deep ball against Missouri? What's your thoughts here, Christ or Guarantano?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it kind of, you do whatever you can to win this game. You obviously don't think about the future with this one. I would think maybe start Keller Christ. I kind of just wrote in our stock report in our stock report piece that one of the things that people forget about is that Tennessee was in that game with Chris early on. I mean, the things that broke it open were Keller Christ did throw a bad pick, but I don't know if that was him or Marcus Callaway running the wrong route.
I know. I've heard he looked off, but Callaway looked lost on that. And you're absolutely, I was thinking the exact same thing when I saw that pick. And, I know that Jeremy Boyle's a bad throw and all this, but there was something on that. I mean, he's going long and the pass is going short, and like, really? It seemed to me almost that he was, because they threw deep to him, and every time it was like, oh, wait a minute, now I throw a deep ball, I don't turn around and catch the ball. It seemed as if he was unfamiliar with how to catch a deep ball. And I thought that was sort of how, we've talked about this, the offense at Tennessee this year almost seems to be, make sure Guarantano gets the highest possible quarterback rating possible, and we'll go from there. And anyway, I just thoughts here. I mean, do you think that throwing deep against Vanderbilt, always a tough defensive team, do you think that could be the recipe for success, or is it still going to be play cards of the vest and hope that Vandy turns the ball over, that sort of thing?
Oh, I think throwing deep is will be the recipe for success. The reason it didn't work, they took a few more shots against Missouri, but the problem was, Tennessee can't throw deep when it doesn't work as well when you're down by 25 points and the defense knows you're desperate. Mm-hmm. Which is why I was bringing up that, the deep ball was actually working until Missouri, the main turning point was that Calhoun Billson fumble that Missouri returned for a touchdown that put them in complete control of the game. Tennessee really isn't built to be able to come back when they're when the offense knows you have to throw deep. Mm-hmm. So I think the big thing is they kind of have to stay in game, and that's why I brought up the Keller Christ interception. If you take away that interception in the first half, that I don't know if it was on Callaway or Chris, but it looked like it may have been on Callaway. And if you take away that third game fumble, then you have a totally different game, and He just may not look nearly as bad as he did.
Yeah, well,
at that point.
That's the turnover margin in today's football. That's why that's the big sin. And that's basically, I think, why fans and perhaps coaching staff are high on Jared Guarantano because, by throwing the high percentage passes almost exclusively, he has perhaps kept the Vols offense very conservative, but he hasn't made those big mistakes, with the exception maybe of the Florida game. You've got your stock up, stock down report for Tennessee, Caleb Calhoun. Who's got their stock up?
Right now I said that special teams as a whole has their stock up. I mean, I know they don't know how to recover an onside kick, but it was the one positive unit for the Vols over the weekend. And they went from, against Charlotte, they had a punt return for a touchdown. Last week, they blocked a field goal, and then this past Saturday, they blocked an extra point, and they had 2 nice kickoff returns, funny enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think special teams as a whole has to stock up. And I do say the wide receivers right now have their stock up. Now, that depends on what happens with Marquez Callaway's health. And I do think he may have run the wrong route on that play, but, they're still, let's call it what it is. They're still winning jump balls every time you throw it up. And you got to give them credit for that. But that's a little bit of a less of a stock up in the special teams as a whole.
Tennessee has always been wide receiver U, and I think that might be the strength of the team this year, to tell you what, Callaway, Jennings, etc. I've been in, all things considered, they haven't been thrown too deep that much, but it's still like, okay, those are guys that you can throw to here and such. You were talking about the stocks down, and that would be the defensive backs, I guess the exception of Goodrich, and the also pass protection. Talk a little bit why you think those stocks are down.
Well, I said back 7 as a whole, because they really got exposed, or back 8 since Tennessee runs a 3-4, but they really run. Tennessee's back 8 has struggled a lot against balanced offenses this year. And, it was easy against Kentucky when Kentucky is so one-dimensional. And they got exposed badly over the weekend on Saturday. Now, pass protection, I wrote was down. Now, you're right. That's more on the running back blocking and the tight ends blocking. I thought the tight ends did a horrific job blocking over the weekend, too, more than it is the offensive line. But the interesting part is, though, earlier in the year, the outside parts of the line was the strong suit. And recently, I would say over the past couple of weeks, the guard play has come on. The interior of the offensive line has actually come on pretty well, and the tackles have struggled a little more. And you notice that I pointed out this, the run game has looked a little bit, run blocking has looked significantly better than pass blocking.
Oh, huge holes. They're, even at the end, when they're basically letting the game play out, the final drive. And I realize Missouri also could say, look, you want 20 yards, go take it. We're winning this game. It doesn't matter if it's 26 or 33, that sort of thing. But, the holes were there. The holes were there throughout. The run blocking interior, wait a minute, where's the middle linebacker? Hold on, this is incredible right now, anyhow, I agree with you on the run blocking. Any word on Trey Smith that you've heard?
Nothing yet, nothing I've heard yet. You wonder if if the blood clots returns, you wonder if he can ever play again, which you hate for him. But, I think for Pruitt, the big focus right now, it needs to be maintaining Wanya Morris and hoping to God he can get Darnell Wright into Knoxville, the top prospect out of West Virginia.
Okay.
And so, his big focus right now needs to be continuing to shore up the offensive line, and also, and this is the big fear for Tennessee in the future, defensive line, because all 3 defensive linemen are seniors this year. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the defensive line has had no depth this year whatsoever. And it seems every game, this was a terrible type of game for them, because getting locked in a shootout where Missouri's on the field a lot, Kyle Phillips, Alexis Johnson, and Shai Tuttle just get tired in the end because the backups are not producing the way we thought they would.
I agree. The backups not producing the way they were. Let's talk a little bit now about Vanderbilt. I talk about inconsistency. That's Vandy. You don't know what team is going to show up. Do you ever know anyone? But, we can kind of establish, is it going to be the team that beats Florida or that, doesn't beat Florida. What am I talking about here? But that plays with Notre Dame. Or is it going to be the team that gets, that loses to a team that you thought they could hang with, that gets blown out by South Carolina? One of those games, you just don't know. Kyle Shermer, is this a guy that could be a late round draft choice? Or is it somebody who's, just like so many guys you thought at Vanderbilt that were halfway decent, and then they don't turn it. They turn out to be doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs instead of, pro football players. What are your thoughts right now on Vanderbilt?
I think that Vanderbilt easily, now they won last week against Ole Miss. They easily could have won 3 games before that. They easily could have beaten Florida and could have beaten Kentucky and could have beaten Missouri. They played all 3 teams close, so they've been really since October, they've been a dangerous team to beat. And I think that is something for Tennessee to be scared of. A lot of people, I think, are overreacting to the idea that Vanderbilt played Missouri close while Tennessee got blown out. I don't really put too much stock into that, only because Vanderbilt was coming off a bye. They kind of threw everything at Missouri for the first half, and Missouri kind of regrouped. And also, we just talked about how there were just a couple of plays here and there that turned that Missouri game into a blowout. So I think that's not something as much for Tennessee to worry about. But Vanderbilt's really, they've been a team to worry about. I mean, like I said, since the start of October. So Tennessee can't take this game lightly. You also don't know. It used to be you go to Nashville and Tennessee's basically playing a home game. I don't know if that's going to be the case on Saturday.
It's intriguing. Why? Now, by the way, why would you say that? Because, yeah, you usually think 40,000-seat stadium, at least 20,000 will be there wearing orange. This year, is it just because of the Vols' lackluster play the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, it was senior day. They just had a huge thrilling win over Kentucky, and only 88,000 showed up for the game last Saturday. And, I don't know if you are. I'm one of those people who never, ever blame the fans, really. It's up to the team to put a product for the fans to buy.
Do you know how many programs would love to have 88,000 fans in the stands? Do you know that that's 95% of the college football programs in America? Just off the top of my head, would probably love to have the problem of 88,000 fans attending their games. No,
that is true.
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt being one of them, obviously. Though I do ask this, how important is it for Tennessee to win this game? Because to me, I think that it is extremely important. You go 6-6 into a bowl game, there's a feeling of things are turning around. You go 5-7 the second year, you lose 5 out of 7 to Vanderbilt. There really is, that's yesterday's program, and you can have all the nice words coming out of the athletic department and all this, but there is the feeling of yesterday's program. I think it's a huge game for Tennessee. Am I overrating it, or would you?
No, I agree. I've said this for a while. That bowl games are huge for programs, particularly under first-year head coaches. And you've got to get that. That's kind of one of the big things. You've got to get to a bowl game. I mean, it was not to say that all hell breaks loose if Jerry Pruitt does lose Saturday, but yeah, it is a big concern if he doesn't win. And so I'm with you. It is a huge deal to try to get to a bowl game.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Tennessee will have next year a much softer schedule. It's not West Virginia, it's BYU. It's not LSU or even Auburn. It's Mississippi State, which may not be, the old Mississippi State or so, but still, coming in, Mississippi State comes into Knoxville. That's not like, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a feeling there. Plus, Drew Lock isn't going to be there. The wide receiver Swinney over at South Carolina isn't going to be around, and the Gamecocks have to come to Knoxville. So, the schedule, I do think eases up. Vanderbilt comes into Knoxville. Say what you will. So I do think that next year is going to be a year in which the Vols can turn things around. But yeah, there is going to be a feeling to recruits and such. That's one of the reasons why I would start right now Keller Christ. I would almost say, okay, look, senior, you came here. But to me, right now, Tennessee is in a situation where they've had 2 grad transfers that I really was excited about. Shaq Wiggins last year, Keller Christ this year, and neither one of them played. And I'm like, are you ever going to get a grad transfer if this is how you treat them, I almost think from that standpoint, you've got to play Chris. And if he continues to throw a couple of bad picks, well, it's Vanderbilt. Then we'll find out what the other quarterbacks can do. I mean, you gave him his shot. That's the way I look at this. I know you were saying you don't quite know, but do you think that because Chris and Wiggins have sat, that's a concern for the future for grad transfers?
I don't know about Wiggins, only because Wiggins was under the previous coaching staff, and I think that, we're going to have to be honest with ourselves here that while programs do matter, players look at coaches more than they look at the programs a lot of times. And so I think Chris could be a concern, and not just Chris, but Madre London. But to be fair, Jeremy Pruitt tried to play Madre London, and he didn't pan out the way we thought he would this year. I mean, the guy was a power back, and I don't know how many times he couldn't get a first down on the 3rd and inches.
You mentioned him. I even had forgotten totally about that. I mean, which shows you how much of a lack of a factor that was and such. Of course, I always thought that Ty Chandler was the guy, not necessarily Jordan, but Chandler was the guy that I was all excited about this season and such. So say what you will.
Yeah, I think Ty Chandler is the best back of the bunch long term. I mean, Jordan is the smarter back and makes, I guess, more the right plays, but, sometimes you go for, sometimes I'm one of those that I kind of believe with running backs. I believe the special running back is more important than the guy that makes the right moves or has the right vision.
Okay.
And I think that's where athleticism comes through.
I will say this. I also think that this might be a more important, as much as we talked about the importance of this game for Tennessee, I mean, making a bowl game, not making a bowl game, the whole perception. Are you on the way up or are you spinning your wheels? For Derek Mason, does he have to win this game to keep his job?
That's a good question. I don't know. One thing Derek Mason could be able to sell. People always compare him to James Franklin and what James Franklin did. James Franklin cashed in on a really weak SEC East while he was there. And Derek Mason has he's scheduled tougher since he's been there. The East has gotten better. So I think this year, given the state of the program at Vanderbilt, the Vanderbilt goes 5-7. They lost to Notre Dame by 5. They almost beat Kentucky. I mean, they had a brutal schedule this year. They had a brutal road. It wasn't as brutal as Tennessee's, only because Tennessee had to play Alabama. I think there's one formula that SB Nation does that shows the Vols have actually played the toughest schedule in the country. Now, take it how you will with that, but I don't think Vanderbilt's that far behind when it comes to playing a brutal schedule this year.
It's curious. I, wrote a big story Saturday Down South a couple of years ago and saying how they can win. And really it was one of those things like, well, why do they always lose? Let's look at this and let's see how they can. Not that this is some sleeping giant in the SEC, but suggesting that, well, maybe sometime in the next 20 years they could have a 10 victory season or something. But yeah, there are a lot of factors against them. But I will say this, you beat Tennessee 5 out of 7 years. Those academic schools, those traditional academic schools, they're able to win now. Look, Northwestern's going to play for the Big Ten title. Stanford has been a power for 10 years. Those things of, our academics are really tough. I'm not sure that hurts the football program the way that used to think. And even though I had Woody Woodenoffer once on here who says, look, I mean, you can be smarter, but if they're 20 pounds heavier than you and stronger, you're probably not going to be able to block them. I've always thought that having that intellect has got to be something of an advantage. It's got to have something cunning and all that. If you're one of those, and it's working for Northwestern and Stanford. That's all I can say.
Well, to be fair, though, it also depends on where you're playing, too. I mean, the Vanderbilt playing in the SEC East or just playing in the SEC in general has it a little, Northwestern plays in the weaker Big Ten division.
Okay.
And same with Stanford, although I don't know, Pac-12 North actually may not be weaker anymore. It actually might be tougher. But traditionally, it's not. There's not as much of a recruiting. There's not as much of a bloody recruiting war for players out there as there is down here or down south. And but I do understand your point. And you're seeing it with Duke too, with David Cutcliffe, who I think has done a phenomenal job at Duke.
Sure. I mean, they won the Coastal a few years ago. Who would have thought that was possible there when Duke was going 1-10 every year and such? I've often said, the cerebral universities, look where the quarterbacks come from. I mean, there's a reason why Tom Brady is so good, and he took those advanced classes and all that. Okay, Vandy is a 3.5-point favorite, and you got that on allfortennessee.com, Caleb Calhoun. Who do you think wins the football game?
Not sure yet. I'm going to have to wait a little bit more, maybe until like a day or two. We're going to do our predictions early this week only because Thanksgiving game's on Thursday. But the reason I'm waiting, I'm going to see if Pruitt gives us any updates on Callaway and Garantano.
Okay,
and see what he does there.
What bowl do you want Tennessee to make? What bowl realistically? What's your dream bowl matchup?
Dream bowl matchup, or what bowl would it be great for them to make? I mean, the best bowl for them to make would be the Taxpayer Bowl, which they made once before at 6-6. Because again, they were able to draw the fans. Now that is above what they would deserve, but it would be a bowl game for them to make. Outside of that, if you want a home game for the fans, obviously there's the Music City and the Liberty Bowl. Either one of those, Memphis or Nashville, the fans would show up for that. But I think the top bowl game for Tennessee to want to make would be the Taxpayer Bowl. That's probably their best case scenario.
I can't.
And it's one thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't remember if it's still called the Tire Bowl or the Belk Bowl or whatever. The one they play in Charlotte. I know I saw one of the projectors, they say, playing Georgia Tech in that game. And I said, okay, yeah, old-time rival. I remember that was fun to begin the first game. Georgia Tech, tennis, and all that. And it would be kind of interesting to begin the season in Charlotte and end it as well. I kind of thought that. Of course, I'm also in East Tennessee, and so Charlotte's kind of easy for the fans to get here too.
Yeah, I don't think Tennessee wants to play a triple option at all, though.
Well, no, but I understand nobody does, not even Alabama. Hey, I'm up against it. I got to take a break. Caleb Calhoun, all for Tennessee, the one true journalist covering the Vols.